Welcome into a quick Monday mailbag. I'll be going over your questions that you gave me last night. I posted a prompt yesterday, so if you missed it, my bad, but I want to start dropping these semi-regularly. So we're going to start off with my guy, Zach. He says, how many of Krish's questions are you going to answer in the mailbag? He dropped like 4 of them. I will not answer them all. That's all I'm going to say on that. Clearly a Bot asks, which players should we avoid during trade season? Nurkic to the Dubs for James Wiseman and a salary filler, then flip James Wiseman and salary to get Sabonis or Turner. Well, Sabonis is one of my names to avoid during trade season. He doesn't solve anything for us. He doesn't shoot the ball. He doesn't play good defense. He's a good player and would be a good fit on some other teams in the league, but for a team struggling with defense, who's kind of built around their guards, they need shooting to space the floor for those guards, and they need defense. Sabonis provides neither. Jeremy Grant would be another name I think he's going to be overpaid for. And then I'm souring on Miles Turner. He's not a guy that I would really look to out and get because I think teams are going to overpay for him. If you want a big man in the mold of a Miles Turner, I think Mohamed Bamba would be a better name. And that's simply because it would take a lot less to get Mo Bamba, and I think he can do about 80% of what Miles Turner can do. Krish asks, if we keep Nurk and attempt to re-sign him, how much is it going to cost? I think it's going to cost about what he's making this year. I would say in the $12 million range. I think that he'll at least get about $10 million, the full mid-level exception. I think there's a team out there that'll give him that bare minimum, so it'd be interesting to see if he earns more. Grace asks, who is your all-time favorite Blazer player? And also, do you think we will make the playoffs this year, or will we just be hoping for the lottery? My favorite all-time Blazer player is Damian Lillard. Before that, it was Brandon Roy. I've never really had another favorite because I didn't watch back in the 90s or anything. Do I think we'll make the playoffs? That's a good question. I would put the odds below 50%, but I still think there's a chance. It's not like we're too far behind teams that we won't be able to catch up. And with Anthony playing great and CJ coming back and then Norm coming back sometime soon, most likely, and we still got Nurkic here, we have a roster that is capable of winning some games, and it seems like we've started to play better on the road, so I wouldn't rule it out. I don't want to just gun for the playoffs this year for another first round exit, so I'm not really on board with that, but I'm just going to wait and see what happens. I'm not going to have too strong of a preference as to what we do except for who we trade. Krish, question number 2, says, odds for how likely these players are to be traded. CJ, I would put CJ at about 50%. Norm, I would put Norm actually higher at about 60%. Nurkic, I would put it like 35 to 40%. Rocco, I would put at 70%. And then Nance, I would put at 20%, 25% chance for him. So, let me know in the comment section what you guys think the odds are for each of those players to be traded, because I'm definitely curious to see what the comment section puts as the odds for those guys to be sent out of Portland at this year's trade deadline. Shy Guy asks, what is your goal for the lineup to be by the start of next season? I want it to include Dame, I want it to include Simons, I want it to include one of Pascal Siakam or Ben Simmons. Pascal Siakam would be my first choice, but Ben Simmons would be my second. I would want to have a center that could shoot threes and protect the rim if we got Ben Simmons, but I wouldn't be against bringing Nurkic back. And then starting power forward, I have no idea, or I guess it would be maybe the starting small forward if we put Ben Simmons at the power forward, or if we got Pascal Siakam. Who the other forward would be, I don't know. Just hopefully a guy that can play defense, maybe a little bit better on-ball defense than Rocco, and a little bit more of a consistent three-point shooter than Rocco. That would be ideal in that sort of lineup. Zachary Brem asks, how screwed are the Blazers actually? Well, it depends on your definition of the word screwed. Veeks asks, do you think Cronin has a chance to become the full-time shot caller after the season? What are the deciding factors? One of the deciding factors is Damian Lillard's vocal support of him, which he's extended towards Cronin. I think that definitely matters a little bit. Beyond that, I don't know if ownership wants Cronin to make a huge splash. I think they'll want him to duck the luxury tax, so I am pretty positive he's going to end up doing that no matter what we do at this deadline. So that could help his case potentially. It's hard to say just because the team's in such a weird spot. I don't really know what ownership is expecting or wanting out of him beyond just getting the team out of the luxury tax, but he definitely has a chance to become a full-time shot caller. I definitely wouldn't rule that out. Chris S. asks, you've talked a lot on the channel about potential trades for CJ and Norm because we have too many good guards. On the last broadcast, Kevin Lamar, we're talking about Ant as an asset. Is there any chance we trade or sign in trade Ant now or at the end of the season? If so, who would you want in return? I don't want to sell him at all, but I figure this is still a possibility. And I can't rule out that possibility. They could definitely trade him. If we trade him, we better be getting back a Pascal Siakam. I don't want to trade Ant at this point. I feel like it would be a situation where 5 years from now, the dude's averaging 28 points per game and is one of the borderline top 10 players in the league, and we're just sitting there like, why in the world did we give him up for Miles Turner? Or why the hell did we give him up for Domantas Sabonis? Or, I feel like it could be a Jermaine O'Neal situation real quick if we end up trading Simons outwards. So it's hard to even say what I would want because I don't want a Simons trade. But, I mean, with the state this team is in, I can't rule out them sending Simons outwards. I think they have to trade 2 guards at this deadline. They definitely should keep Dame, and I'm of the opinion that they should definitely keep Ant, but his name is obviously more up in the air. I am on board with the CJ and Norm going out for sure. Rahi asks, with Ant playing how he is, would you try and trade CJ and Norm and have Ant be our starting 2 next season? Well, I just answered that question. If we were only going to make one trade at the deadline, what would your ideal trade be? If the team we have right now is still good to tank, if so, would you expect the front office to be sellers so we can then tank for a lottery pick, hoard assets, and make a push for another star next year around the draft? I can't predict the front office, man. I don't know. I don't know. People have asked me recently what do I think is going to happen, and what I want to happen and what I think might be possible and what I think is going to happen is 2 completely different conversations, because what I want to happen is just my own opinion. What I think will happen I have to put myself in the mindset of the ownership group and the front office. And it's just hard to say with a GM who we've never really seen make a personnel move outside of a 10-day contract. So if we're only going to make one trade at the deadline, I would probably want it to be Rocco being sent to Chicago, our first-round pick being sent back to us, and then Derek Jones Jr. being sent to a third team. If we could get an asset out of that third team as well, that would be ideal. But that is kind of the go-to trade for us, simply because it opens up our future first-round picks, since the pick we owe Chicago is currently lottery protected through 2028. Pineapples says, I'm all for Dame and Ant starting in the backcourt next year, and I agree with you when you say that Ant could easily be better than CJ. Due to the media, I still think the narrative of having 2 6'3" guards like with Dame and CJ is going to be present with Dame and Ant. So do you think the criticism will be warranted, or do you think Dame and Ant could do way more than Dame and CJ could? Offensively, sure, but mostly defensively. Really good question. There was a metric that came out that said Anthony Simons is really good at navigating on-ball screens. And I don't know exactly what that metric is based off of, but he was like in the top 5 in terms of guards navigating on-ball screens. So that's already much better than CJ and Dame, because CJ and Dame would never have a chance at ranking in the top 5 in that type of metric, considering how bad they are at navigating on-ball screens. But as far as the defense goes, I think Ant can be better than CJ. So if we use CJ and Norm to get really good defensive help in the front court, and then Ant is better than CJ, we could hypothetically be close to a top 10 defense. In that case, I don't think anybody will be comparing Dame and Ant to Dame and CJ, considering how much better defensively that team would be. And it's like if you have a really good defense, then what's the point of complaining about having 2 6'3" guards and that crushing your hopes defensively? You know what I mean? Some people think it's impossible for a Dame and Simons backcourt to ever be even close to a top 10 defense, so I guess we'd have to wait and see on that. But it would be a situation where I think people would hopefully give Dame and Ant some time, and hopefully we'd have good defensive front court players, and then hopefully that defense is good enough where people aren't sitting there complaining about the 6'3" backcourt. Krish asks, if Anthony Simons keeps this up, obviously efficiency will go down, but I think he can keep this production up. Is he the most improved player frontrunner? And it's hard to say because there's some other players out there that are probably in the running for that award, and I don't really know exactly who they are, to be honest. I can't really think of the names off the top of my head, but if Simons goes from averaging like 8 points per game, which he did last year, to 18 points per game by season's end, then he definitely has to be in the conversation for most improved, and that would be a pretty cool award for him to win. Embarking Box asks, if we tank and the pick ends up being Chet Holmgren, how vital would it be to put a strong center next to him, or do you think he could play some at center with a vet post defender to back him up? It would just depend on how much weight he would be able to add by the start of next season. I don't think he's as hopeless at the center position as some people think. He's definitely very, very skinny, but he knows how to use his length. Even if he gets caught in bad positions due to being overpowered a little bit, he's still able to make his length make up for that. He's still able to block shots. He's still hard to score on. It's not a situation where, you can completely physically dominate him to the point where you just can score over him because the dude is 7'1" with like a 7'7" wingspan or something insane. And here's the thing. In the NBA, how many centers want to back down in the post? You got Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns will, but a lot of centers aren't. There's a lot of centers that like to shoot. There's a lot of centers that aren't really comfortable backing down in the post. I mean, you look at a Miles Turner, who's everybody's favorite center trade target. That dude doesn't back down in the post. That dude is not a post player at all. You look at like a Kevon Looney. I wouldn't be worried about him posting up. You look at a DeAndre Ayton. I mean, he can score out of the post a little bit, but a lot of his buckets come off of playing off of Devin Booker and Chris Paul. So, and here's the thing. If Chet is having to guard the post, you can send a second defender and try and double and get the ball out of the big man's hands. Now, you need to rotate beyond that so you don't get stuck in a bad position. But, there's ways to work around it with Chet playing the center, so I think he could play that a little bit, even if he's still as skinny as he is this year, so I don't think it's as hopeless as people think. It's definitely not the ideal thing, given how skinny he is, though, so I think starting off his career, he's going to be a power forward, and I agree with it being somewhat vital to put a strong center next to him to be able to defend the Embiids and the Jokic's of the world and let Chet play power forward until he puts on enough strength to be able to handle the center position. Alex Wolf asks, which teams could you see being interested in Ben McLemore at the deadline potentially? Thanks. Any team that needs a shooter off the bench. There's a lot of teams that could use a shooter off the bench, so it could be any number of teams. Anyway, that wraps up your mailbag questions. Thank you for watching. Thank you for asking them. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.